This is Derek O'Father-in-Law with The Medicine Shell, and I thought I would post my interview with Irie FM for anybody that wasn't able to listen to the original broadcast. Apologies for the audio in advance. I was in a rural part of the country, and it definitely affected the broadcast, so my apologies for that. Also, if you're interested in having the digital Igbo calendar on your phone with the moons, observances, holidays, and the 4 market days, as well as the meanings behind it all, I created one that could merge with your Apple or Google Calendar. It's available for all patrons that join this moon, which is Onwa Ano. Onwa Ano begins June 10th, 2021, and will end July 9th, 2021. So join in time at patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. Again, that is patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. As always, patrons have access to an in-house debia of my recommendation for readings, therapy, and spirit work. Patrons also have access to my library, which has hundreds of ebooks, articles, and studies that I use for my own research. All this is available at patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. With that being said, let's begin.
Good morning, my brother Derek. Are you there?
Good morning, sister. I'm hoping you can hear me better.
All right, I'm hearing you a little better. It's not as clear as we'd want to, but it is a little bit better. So let's see if we can go with that. It's a little bit clearer, and let's see. All right, so just to remind ourselves, we're talking about Igbo cosmology. We were just looking at who are the Igbo people, and one of the things you told us is that the Igbos say that we are the first people, and you mentioned that with Pan-Africanism, and especially the narrative within Pan-Africanism, Kemet is front and center. And you're saying that part of the reason why even knowledge or the knowing of Igbo and the Igbo people and the Igbo cosmology seems to have been lost on us has to do with colonization and enslavement and so on. So could you pick up from there?
Yes. So as I was saying earlier, Igbo people, by theory, see themselves as an ancient people or the first people. Now, whether or not the Igbo people are the first people or the origin of the cultures in Africa is debatable. There's a lot of evidence on an archaeological level that would confirm something was happening in that place far beyond what we would now call recorded history.
Yes.
There are artifacts in Igbo land that are older than anything that we have found so far in Kemet that would suggest human civilization and so forth. So with the combination of these things, the science is now backing what was the ancestral knowledge or what has been known and said within the culture.
Yes.
But again, we don't have anything definitive. You know, most cultures in Africa, we're a very proud people. So everybody's going to say that they're the first or they're the highest and so forth. But as far as Igbo people go, there are artifacts in Igbo land that predate a lot of what we're seeing in Kemet. There was a place in what is the state of Enugu known as Leja. Leja has an iron-working site with visible evidence of ironworking that predates any evidence of ironworking anywhere else in the world. These are things that were kept from us, even within Nigeria, and of course kept from the diaspora as a whole.
So much we have lost. So much we have lost in the crossing. So much we have lost in the Ma'afa. But as you said earlier, this is a time of awakening and reawakening. And let us go now to cosmology. When we talk about cosmology, because we're talking about Igbo cosmology, what is cosmology?
Cosmology is a people's understanding of creation and of existence of the cosmos. So when we speak of cosmology, we speak of what our ancestors, those first people, saw and recorded through lived experience. And a cosmology then forms the foundation of science, all sciences. Because it is in that observation that they decode and put together the knowledge necessary to keep their lineage or their people or their nation alive through multiple generations. So when you encounter the cosmologies of ancient peoples, such as Kemetic cosmology, Odinani, or what we call Ifa, the Yoruba one, and so forth, we are speaking of a something beyond belief and something beyond worldview. These are what our ancestors observed, and in their own language and their own way passed it down to us in order to ensure our survival and our prosperity as a people.
And so within that context, we want to look at Igbo's concept of God. One of the things that has happened to us as a people here in the diaspora, in Jamaica, I can tell you, is that you literally learn in school that we hardly have any concept. As Africans, we hardly had any concept of God, that God had to be brought to us on the continent of Africa, and that even if we had a concept of God, then it was sinful. So that whatever African is sin and everything else is right. So let us talk about Igbo concept, the concept of God within the Igbo cosmology.
So, and I'm very glad you brought this up, because the fact that particular method of indoctrination is so global speaks to how effective it is in derooting people from what they have. And once you deroot people from what they have, it's of course easy to come up from under them and take it, which was clearly the plan. But the Igbo concept of God. So throughout Igbo land, you'll hear God referenced in multiple names, but the understanding of the nature of God is universal. God, most popularly, is known as Chineke, right? Chineke is often combined in the Christian appropriation of the word as a single entity or a single word. But in reality, Chineke, when we say na, and I know that in Patois you guys carry the same word, but when we say that, we often mean, or we mean double or two. So, and. Chi is one thing, Eke is another. We understand God as creator and creation, right? Creator and creation, meaning that the world itself, what we're observing, is God in a physical manifestation. But then that is the Eke, or the creation aspect of God, right? Now, Eke is often referred to as the wife of God, or the embodiment or physical representation that then makes God manifest as a whole. On the other end, we now have the concept of Chi, right? And Chi is the source spark that brings everything into creation and sustains all things. So the combination of these two things, we believe the universe itself is God. And if we were to put it in terms that more people would be familiar with, we believe that the universe has a soul, and that soul itself is also God. And those two things come together to form the concept of Chineke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that whereas Christianity teaches that, well, not teaches, but Christianity would want us to believe that we have no concept of God and that we worship objects. How is that explained in Igbo's spirituality, in terms of how God is viewed as part of or within the creation, being the creation and the creative force?
Yes. So it is very interesting, but when the Europeans arrived in Africa, when they met other indigenous people or first people, due to their ideas of their own superior belief or desire to believe in their own superiority, when they would look at what was going on, they would quantify it in a very strange way, and they would quantify it as simply as possible into say there's no way that these people are doing the type of thought that would allow them to survive for millions of years, which they have. You understand? But you and I both know that's not the case. So when the Europeans would see a shrine or a physical embodiment of an ancestor or something like that, they would say, oh, they're worshiping this thing, because often you will face this thing to interface with it. But we in this world understand that Christians don't technically worship the physical Bible. It is a tool by which they access what is on the other side. Mm-hmm. It is a tool by which they access the invisible, you understand? Yes. And then we would understand that somebody who is claiming to be a Christian, who is an adept at Christianity, that after a certain level, the individual does not need to look at the Bible nor to reference the Bible. So in Igbo cosmology and throughout Africa, you will see symbols, the use of symbols to give form to something abstract, not necessarily because that symbol itself or the thing is what you're referencing to, but it gives you a means of communicating that idea to your own self. right? So, for example, when we, and in many African cultures, we'll have the concept of the ancestor altar. But to believe that the altar itself is your ancestors and not a medium by which you can understand and symbolize the connection with your ancestors, if you miss the connection if you're interpreting it that way. You understand? So in Igbo cosmology, I spoke of the concept of chi or chuku, the big chi. You understand, or the grand chi. Chuku is never depicted. There are no depictions of Chuku. You do not draw Chuku. There are no statues of Chuku, anything like that. Chuku is not depicted. And that is what we're referencing when we're referencing God, because Chuku's vastness is the universe itself. Again, the universe is a reflection of the Creator. Creator and creation are one. And if you were to try to depict Chuku, you would have to recreate the entire universe, which you nor I or anybody listening do not have the power to do. So when you see these things, the Irie or temples or shrines and things like that, these are symbols by which we understand and communicate and pass on an idea.
And so that Chuku is to understand it within the English concept, is that Kush or the Christian concept, because we are balancing. We're allowing our listeners to understand what we're talking about by making the comparison, even though there really isn't any. But for you to grasp that when we say Chuku, then we're talking God, bigger than God.
When we say Chuku, we are speaking of God, but you said it very aptly. When we make these comparisons, often we lose meaning on both ends, right? So that if I say Chuku is God, you're only getting half of our ancestors' understanding of the God body or the nature of God itself, right? So Chuku is God, or the spirit that we would call God, the Holy Spirit, the spirit we would call God, if we want to translate it as closely as possible to Christianity. But again, it is one of the two aspects of God. So as you are body and soul, so is the universe. So the universe itself is God. We live within God. Everything we see is God. And therefore, if you look at the way our ancestors approached the world, the reason it is important to make this distinction, if you look at the way our ancestors approached the world, before you dig a hole in the ground to plant a seed, you ask the earth for permission. You give the earth its due respect because of what it is. Right? Because you are speaking to something that is beyond you. You're speaking to creation itself. So you ask the earth for its permission. When you go out and you see the sun, you greet the sun as a great elder. Things like that. So Chuku, if we want to say God, yes, Chuku is God. But like you said, oftentimes when we do these cross comparisons, though I know it's necessary for people to make the transition to a new form of thinking or a new form of understanding, it is necessary. But oftentimes we lose a lot of key important things, especially when it comes to the thinking of our ancestors, which was vastly different from what was presented to us as a people in the ages we are today.
Right. You see, there's so much that we've lost, as I said again, so much that we feel but do not know, that we are now reaching for in this age of awakening, this time of reawakening, that the understanding is critical. I have so many questions coming in on the different lines and the different social media platforms from our listeners. But you mentioned Chi. And let's talk about that a little bit, because you've done so much work. I think our listeners should know this on The Medicine Shell on Patreon, which will ask you how our listeners can access those and be a part of that process. On this, and I think it's phenomenal in the way you're opening up our eyes to ourselves. Explain to us the Chi, what this is.
Absolutely. So earlier I referenced Chineke as what we would call God, which is creator and creation, right? Chineke is also a formula, the formula by which all creation is done and happens. So as the universe has a chi that we reference to as Chuku, you as an individual, I as an individual also have our own chi. We are a manifestation of this thing called our chi. So So in that there is God, there's also a divinity within us, or we ourselves and the people we interact with are also divine in the same nature of as God as we are from God, right? Chineke is known as the first couple, and as everyone knows, you will reflect your mother and you will reflect your father. So we have this thing called the chi. Now the chi itself is your source spark. Outside of being because again, even your body is considered a divinity. Outside of being your own, a link to divinity, it is your source spark. It's the force by which your manifestation and your destiny come from. It is the source by which your trajectory in life and the person you become or manifest into and your awareness come from, right? It is your sentience, it is life itself. So your chi brings all of these things into life. Our ancestors often reference the sun as the most exact or the closest to exact representation of the chi in the world. So if you think of what the sun is to the earth, or what the sun is to the galaxy, or in a very simple way, what the sun is to the sky and to the day, that is what your chi is to you. So often in ancestral cosmology, you will see the connection on a spiritual level to the individual chi more so than you will see that of Chukwu, because often we go to what is divine or what is beyond us for intervention. Right? In Igbo cosmology, the term we often translate as prayers, Irie, but Irie is simply asking for intervention. Right? It is your chi that will do the intervention. Everything that is already in Chukwu's design. Right? Everything that is all good or bad is already a part of Chukwu's design. So it is not for us to ask on that level for intervention. What we will go to is our chi, our own personal chi, so that if this thing is a part of this design, give us the guidance by which we move and navigate across it, give us the strength to accept it, and if it is something that can be overcome, give us the power and ability to overcome it. So that is your connection with your chi, that source spark that manifests you into the world.
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. It is Running African, and my special guest online this morning talking to us about Igbo spirituality is my brother Derek Fadinwinwa, and he is a researcher and teacher of Odinani Igbo cosmology on YouTube at Patreon. He believes African people worldwide cannot be understood without evidence-based study of our diverse spiritual systems, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Evidence-based study. In the meantime, though, let us get to know ourselves through our brother. So, Derek, as I said, I'm going to take this slowly and from a very kindergarten perspective, because I think we have to start somewhere, and this conversation with you this morning is starting somewhere. So then, we looked at the concept of God. Now, and we talk about chi, which took us to the concept of self in a way. But I want to backtrack a bit, because when you talk about Chukwu, for example, are we talking about what kind of energy? It's a feminine energy or a masculine energy? We say Mother, Father, God in this space, and we understand ourselves within that context. But is there that kind of gender assignation to Chukwu?
Yes. So, and this, of course, is debated. But what is understood most widely is that the nature of Chineke, right? So, Chukwu is a manifesting masculine father energy. Eke is the sustaining mother energy. Right? So when I say Chukwu, I'm speaking of the first father or the divine father. When I say Eke, I'm speaking of the first mother and the divine mother. And it is the coupling of these two things by which that divinity is derived from, and creation and manifestation. It is the coupling. And that is why I referred to earlier Chineke as a formula. As a formula. So the way you would say Father and Mother God is the exact same way it is said in our own context as well. Right? It's the exact same way it is said in our own context. Now, what is debated is, or what is I guess what is in that is discussed often and on a more philosophical level, is whether the masculine chi manifests as a feminine Eke, or is it manifest masculine all the way through. But what is most understood and what I think is most accurate is the fact that Eke is the mother. Eke is the mother and the Chi is the father. And the coupling of the two of them create everything. Eke is also the universe itself. It is also the earth. And, you know, on my channel, The Medicine Shell, on YouTube, I share the story of the creation of Chukwu, which is in reality the creation of the universe. And what happens in this story is that in the beginning there is a singularity. So all things begin as one. All things begin as a single spark. And the chi element of that spark separated itself and left the Eke element. So they came into manifestation as together. They came in together. You can say that Chukwu created Chukwu, but in reality, once that split happened, you now have two from one. They come together. Right? And that is why I always emphasize that in when we speak of these things, I prefer the term Chineke. You understand? And they use what term they're comfortable with. But the Eke element is important. We often leave that behind because, again, it doesn't fit that paradigm in Christianity where the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, everybody's a man. You know, it's just men recreating men and things like that. And so the Chineke is the first coupling. Chi, the masculine, the divine masculine element, which does not manifest in the world. Chi, Chukwu does not manifest in the world. It manifests through Eke. It's Eke that brings creation and manifestation into reality because Eke is reality itself. But yes, I hope that answers the question.
It does answer it. And then there's also this concept of good and evil. How is that manifested within the Igbo cosmology? Because we do have for so many Africans, so many of us, whether we're in the continental African or Africans in the diaspora, we are fighting against our own genes, our own genetic memory, because we have been told that even ourselves as Africans, that we become then the evil, and we have to be washed and be whiter than snow. So we have to be other than African to be able to go to heaven, to be saved. You know, on this Sunday morning. How is that viewed within the Igbo cosmology, good and evil, devil and so on?
Yes. So when we speak of Odinani, the term Odinani means as it is on the land. As it is on the land. If we want to be most accurate in doing a translation of Odinani, we would reference it, or we would call it a science more than we would call it a religion. Odinani is a science more than a religion. And as you know, in science, there's no good or bad within science itself. It is what you use that science to do. And ultimately, that good and bad is determined by your people. It is determined by your family. It is determined by the clan. It is determined by the people and the orientation themselves. And it is also determined based on the relationship you have in the balance of nature, which I'll explain shortly. It is the relationship you have in the balance of nature, which I'll explain shortly. But in Igbo cosmology, and you'll see this throughout Africa, as we know, life began in Africa. So when you look all over the world, you see these common things, right? Like a burial, putting somebody in the ground after they pass away. And ordinarily, unless you look at Africa, you won't have an answer as to why we as a species do that thing, right? In Igbo cosmology, the burial is the reseeding of an individual. So once you're passed, your Eke, your physical self, returns to the physical earth. And in doing that, your people, the people who buried you, have invited you to return into the world. Meaning that if you have done right by your people, you have done right. If you have done right by those who will ultimately put you to rest, meaning your children and the clan itself, you have done right. Now, the other thing is the relationship you have in the balance of order. Ethics and morality in Igbo cosmology is based on the preservation and the advancement of relationships more so than an individual. As I said again, the divinity of Chineke is in the coupling of Chineke. It's the couple. It's the love between them, that creation flows from, right?
Yeah.
And this is the exact same thing in cosmology. So how then do a people derive what is good or bad when ultimately it's up to them? Well, the people, every single person has a relationship with the world itself. When a group of people in the Numbu, the people we call the first people, the ancient people or the Igbo people, when we arrive to a new land, right, we make a covenant with the earth.
Yeah.
The earth is a force we refer to as Anna. Anna is said to be because in the creation story, or one of the many creation stories, that Eke element and dies. She passes away, and she resurrects at Anna. You understand? So that's the earth. So when you reach a new plot of land, or you reach a new place, and you say, I want to live here, and I want to settle, and I want to be fruitful and multiply within this land, you make a promise to that earth that we wish to live in this world. Like I said earlier, even if you dig a hole, you have to ask for permission. You make a promise to the earth and you say, we will keep this land clean. We will live a clean life. We will not do X, Y, Z, be it incest, be it murder, be it just a different list of things. Now, this promise you make to the earth is known as Iwala, the laws of the land. Iwala. So once you have made Iwala, yes, these are the laws of the land. That promise that your original ancestors made to the earth is what you are expected or you are to maintain in order for that nation to sustain itself. So once you enter that land, you make that covenant with the earth. You make your promise to her. She then gives you the authority, your ancestors. When I say you, I don't see the individual as separate from their ancestors. So that your ancestor who was in Africa and made that covenant with the earth is given the authority to be on that land. And with that authority comes the expectation that not only will the original ancestor maintain these laws, but all of their progeny will maintain these laws. And these laws are then what create universal alignment with nature itself, alignment with the earth, the promise not to exploit or deplete or destroy the world that you live in, the promise not to spill blood on the earth, which is a taboo, to spill the blood of your brother or even that of your enemy. Even in war, after you go to war and you fight, you will return to Anna and you'll ask for forgiveness for what you've done. You'll ask for understanding. Right? So morality, or the good and the bad, is determined by the relationships you have with different things. And you are also born with certain relationships because of the covenant your ancestors made with certain lands. When a people then fall astray, when a people break that thing called Iwala, or a generation forgets that thing called Iwala, the earth itself will expel those people from the land, as those people have destroyed the covenant by which sustained and fed them for generations.
So that there is really no evil as such. You create in a way your reality, and the universe responds in kind.
Accordingly, yes, absolutely. And so the reason Odinani is a science is a concentrated, multi-millennial effort to understand that alignment and reach that alignment and make sure that we as people on this earth are walking the path of the first people, and we are living clean and sustaining family and community and continuity of that law and of that balance. And so from there, you get the distinction of Odinani as a science as it is on the land. It is the understanding of the way it is on the land and how thus to live accordingly. Now, the living accordingly is known as Omenala. Odinala or Odinani is the understanding what is on the land. Omenala is literally translates what you do on the land. So there's how it is on the land determines what you do on the land. Odinani determines your Omenala. Once you reach a new land, or once you're in a place, you align yourself with the laws of that part of the earth, or the covenant that your ancestors made.
And my brothers, I'm talking to you, I can't help but think of this knowledge being lost to us in a way, even though we are now being reawakened to the truth, but for so long. So many of our foreparents, though, ancestors now, some of them, but so many of our foreparents would have absorbed this knowledge, and even within our own spaces, we would have experienced some of what you're talking about. I know, for example, my own mother, who, is a gardener in her own right, who doesn't plant unless she talks to the soil, who wakes up every morning and speaks to her plants. And I'm spending some time with her recently because I lost my father, and we're sleeping in the same bed, and every time I hear her go outside in the mornings, and she says good morning. And one morning I said to her, Mama, who are you talking to? And she said, it's just the flowers. And I said, you're still talking to the flowers? And she said, yes, I have to talk to the flowers. And so she has this conversation with the flowers every morning. And then I recall even my own great-grandparents, who were known as the they say I'm not to talk about it on the air, so that's why I'm stuttering. So I just leave it for now. But to think that they kept the waters, the bottomless waters, the deep waters, and that the village people the people of the village, a community, would go to them and would talk to them about what their problems were, and would seek counsel and so on from them. That all of that would have been them, our own people on the ground, somehow understanding themselves and acting out who they were, just being who they were. But Christianity and colonization made these things unlawful, illegal, and sinful. Now, earlier you talked about the dibia, and that's just before we asked you to call back. And I want to go back there to say, when we talk about dibias, who are these, and what do they do? What's their role in the Igbo community?
Absolutely. So a dibia is a dibia, as we said, ordinary is a science. Mm-hmm. So then who are the scientists who are trying to decode and understand this universal language? Mm-hmm. And these are the dibias if they are men, and is and why if they are women. Is and why translates to authority woman, wise woman, or queen.
How do you spell that? How do you spell that? Is and why?
Is and why? Yes, you got it. It is EZENWANYI.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, and so as a man, then if you are a man, you would your chi would manifest you as a dibia, right? A dibia. So these are the scientists, or these are the people who are decoding this language for the survival of a people or their people, and for the understanding, right? As Iwala is, or as of nature are. Even our most adept ancestors could not 100% understand or 100% walk in the line of Kuku's design, right? Mm-hmm. But there's always this gift that is given to certain people, and they would then manifest as what you call a dibia. So a dibia is the individual who is going to, because they are a scientist, a dibia is going to be the individual who's going to make your medicine. A dibia is going to be the individual who heals the sick. A dibia is going to be the individual who is able to see what is unseeable and hear what is unhearable. The dibia is often in our ancestral symbology, right, is often referred to like a dog. And I don't say dog as an insult. Dog is not, there's nothing insulting about the animal or the idea of a dog. But in the sense that if you are able to enter a room with your dog and you have a strange feeling about that person, your dog will feel it. If the weather is going to change, your dog will hear it before you hear it. If your dog is able to see and feel things that you would never be able to see and feel. Right? So in a sense, a dibia is a person whose chi manifests them in that very nature. Now again, with the symbols, if you now see the symbol of that dog in somebody's house, and the dibia now goes and gives thanks and says, like, I want to thank the universe for the gift they gave me. The colonial understand, he's worshiping the dog. No. He's worshiping that statue. No. It's where he goes to thank the universe for that gift. But Adibia is a wise man, so a scientist, the individual who decodes a universal language for the youths and the survival of a people.
Yes. So here now we come head to head with Jamaica and the word Obia. Which and I'm sure you are recognizing that word, right? So
absolutely.
Explain to us what that is, because obviously this is something, and I know you know this, that is pervasive in Jamaica. But for those who have read the book 3 Eyes for the Journey by Dr. Diane Diakete, you would understand exactly why so many of our practices coming out of our own cosmology have been made, evil, illegal, wicked, and so on. Also, our conversation last week with Dr. Kwesi Konado also pointed us to this very same situation. So let us now look at it though through Igbo cosmology and the Igbo way of life. And ways of knowing. This word, which once, even me mentioning it here in this space this morning, some people would have already turned off. Some people would have said, some people would have said, here there, she gone back, gone talk about Obia again, and you see them telling us, so she in the Obia thing, and you're going to have that. And it's good, and so this is a negative response that comes just with the word. But tell us about that word, what it means within our ancient knowledge and our ancient way of knowing.
Absolutely. So one thing I do for my patrons is I provide my research library for everybody.
Yes.
I have hundreds of books, ebooks, articles, things like that, journals, studies, everything you need to in that context. In that folder, I call it the medicine library. And within that library, I have a folder dedicated to diasporic understandings of this science. And Obia is very much that. So I have a lot of resources on Obia. So when you started speaking, not only did I understand what you were talking about, but even being here in America, I understood what you meant by the risk of speaking about it, because I know the history behind that risk and why it was put together. Obia, the word Obia, the origin, right, has, to my knowledge, has not been confirmed. But it is very clear to me in my research that Obia is either a derivative of the word Abia. Remember, I earlier said Dibia. Dibia. D is husband or man. That's what all D is man or authority. That's another word for it. And then Abia is wisdom. Abia is a different type. Abia is a wisdom that comes from beyond you, that comes from the source of sources. Right? So a Diabia or a Dibia is a master or an authority of that wisdom, somebody who has been given that wisdom. And I believe very strongly that the word Obia derives from this idea. There's also the idea that it derives from Obi, which was often a title that we today translate as king, but in reality it is actually when that covenant is kept, the individual who's responsible for making sure that covenant is sustained throughout the years becomes the Obi, or the source or heart of the community, right? They're not a king, they have no authority, they can't tell anybody what to do, but they live as an example, and thus that makes them an exalted person. But Obia is the application of the science that I'm speaking of. Is the application of the science that I'm speaking of. Anybody who has a certain stigma about it, or a certain feeling about it, will not doubt that there is an understanding that these things work. That these things have an effect. If they did not have effect, it would not be stigmatized the way it is throughout the world, but very specifically in the Caribbean. Now, understand this. The Europeans began their enslavement project with the understanding that the people, or the misunderstanding that the people that they were enslaving had no wisdom. Now, you fill a plantation with people from different walks of life and with different levels of wisdom. And within that plantation, or within that structure, that enslavement structure, there are individuals that have that gift or the understanding of that universal science, of the laws of the universe. And these were the people who most often led the rebellions, who most often fortified individuals to fight a force that was physically, though not spiritually, stronger than themselves. The Revolutionary Empire, history of the British Empire, and it goes into the relationship of Ubia and Jamaica, and it was said that at one point that in a single year there was close to 100 slave rebellions. Close to 100 slave rebellions in a year. Now, if you go over to the United States, the number was a little less. So what ended up happening was the planters and those who upheld and benefited from this enslavement structure that was on the island began to mimic what was happening in America. The key difference was when you were sent to America, you were immediately stripped of any culture, any type of identity that connects you back home. Whereas in the Caribbean, originally this was not the case. The plantation life was much more severe, so they did not care what you did because the average person wasn't going to live long enough to have an impact anyway. But they decided to switch the American model of stripping them of that thing, of that obia, because that thing was giving them power, was giving them the ability to fight, and the ability to fight successfully. If you go and trace the history of Haiti, and other places like that. It was a fear of that repeating itself elsewhere that made them say, let's follow that American model and strip whatever Africanness is remaining and make this thing feel ugly to the people who it benefits most.
And understanding also, we were talking about Chief Tachi this morning, who led the 1760 war, they call it rebellion, and the same process that we saw through Bookman in Haiti. Bookman himself coming from Jamaica to Haiti, and we saw that very same process of the rituals that were done before the wars. We see these rituals also in Baba Sam Sharp's war, the war for emancipation, today being 189 years exactly to the date that our Baba Sam Sharp was hung from the gallows for leading the emancipation wars of 1831. We take right, Lagos jumping. Once again, we ask you to just stay tuned and listen out for the times and the dates when we'll be broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. We leave on Tuesday and we get back the other Tuesday after that. So we'll be in Lagos for 6 days or just about 5 days. When we return, we'll tell you all about it. But we're linking live and we're broadcasting this program, the Africa Forum, live from Lagos, Nigeria, next week, Sunday, inshallah, all 4 hours. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum, and we are talking about ourselves, talking about our spirituality, our cosmology, an African way of knowing, returning to the source, returning to who we are, who we were, and who we will be. And in that way, my brother Derek, thank you for staying. Let us talk about reincarnation and death, and the idea of death within Igbo cosmology. I'm touching different things through the program this morning because I want to touch as many topics as possible, and then to in other discussions to spend some more time talking in detail about each one. So let's talk about reincarnation and how this is viewed, or death and reincarnation within Igbo cosmology.
Absolutely. So in the understanding of our ancestors, an individual is comprised of 4 essences. I've heard a person say that these were 4 souls, and it's an apt understanding of that idea. These essences are your chi, your eke, your agon, and your mo. Your chi, your eke, again, that original formula that brings you into life. Your chi being that source or the thing that creates you, the divinity that brings you into existence and conceptualizes you. The eke is that thing by which the chi manifests. Right, so it is the chi in reality, the chi that brings itself into the world of the living and so forth. Eke is you as a part of creation. It is you as creation, right? So then you move on to what is called your agon. Agon is the universal mind. Is the mind within your mind. In Igbo cosmology, it was said that all of the abara are the different manifestations of of Chineke throughout the universe, or the forces of creation, right? The Agun is said to be the wisest of all of these because Agun shares the mind of Chukwu. The mind of Chukwu and Agun are one. And it is said that Agun is the mind of Chukwu, and thus Agun is a part of you as well. It is part of that, the four essences that create you. And then you finally enter what is called your Mo, right? Which is an Oraic essence. Your Mo is an Oraic essence, or a spirit. It is an Oraic essence, or is you as a part of manifestation. Right? So if you think about, I referenced the chi and the sun having a connection. The chi and the sun having a connection. Your Mo is similar to the rays of the sun. It is the rays of your essence that cannot be seen. It is the unseen you that radiates your essence into a room. And we see this on a very real level when, let's say, a person who is depressed or angry enter a room. Everybody in the room will feel that essence from them and become a little more depressed or a little more angry. Meanwhile, if that person's in a room full of happy people, their spirits will then lift that person's individual spirit. So there's a syncing, right? So you have this thing. The Mo is also known as a self-observer, right? It is that thing you say when you say, "Where did I leave my keys?" That's who you're speaking to. It is all things manifest in twos, not as a W. So when an individual passes away, right, the Eke, the body, returns to Eke, creation, which is the earth. The Christians say dust to dust, or ashes to ashes. The Chi is always going to be. That Chi is always going to be. That Chi itself is Chukwu. You understand? So it is always going to be. The Agun, that universal mind, is the one that then reincarnates. Your Agun will return to Chukwu. From returning to Chukwu, it is given a Chi, or a source spark. That spark then returns into Eke, where it is birthed into the world and brought back into the world. So that the Agun that I have, when I pass, and I lived a righteous and holy or balanced life, the Agun that I have will return to the world. And through returning to the world, that Agun is the part of you that reincarnates. Now, what is significant about the fact that this is the part of you that reincarnates is the fact that the Agun, because it returns to Chukwu, it is the part of you that is giving your destiny and your mission in this world. Your mission in this world. So that part of you will enter the world, attempt or try to achieve that mission, and then when you pass, it'll return again and either be given a new mission or be given another route towards manifestation, being a new mission in itself, or a different mission, or repetition of the same mission, right? So that part of you reincarnates, right? And at the same time, that Mo, that essence, remains on earth to be sustained by your descendants. And that is why ancestors are important. Every time you say the name of your ancestors, you bring their Mo, or their light, that Oraic essence, into the world, right? Or back into the world, and so forth. So that is how we understand reincarnation in Odinani or Igbo cosmology.
As we say in this space every Sunday morning, to speak the names of the ancestors is to make them live again. So that and you speak of your own personal experience, just to let you know that I know about that. I have been listening to you. You speak about your own personal experience with your own son as your reincarnated grandfather. Tell our listeners about that, because that's such a beautiful story.
Absolutely. So I want to say it was 2005, I returned to Nigeria because it was clear that my grandfather was passing, right? We understood that he was passing. He lived a long life and had many children, so it wasn't something that was seen with sadness. It was a celebration of universal debt, that all people must die, and so forth. So we were going there to celebrate his life before he passes, make sure he sees his grandchildren and so forth before he goes. Now, my grandfather passed around that time, and I remember on the day he passed, there was something inside of me that told me that I need to begin my own family. there was a feeling of a guard shifting, or a feeling of something changing within me. I said I needed to begin my own family. So I proposed to my then long girlfriend, who was now my wife, and we had a son. Now, what is interesting is when we had the son, I went to my father, who was still in Nigeria, and said, can you go and check who he reincarnated from? My father went to a town where he himself is not known. People don't know. He went far to get a reading. You understand? And when he got that reading, the Dibia, right, that wise man told him that I don't do divination on this day. I cannot do that for you on this day, but I will tell you your father has returned. He doesn't know him from anybody. He went to where he stayed. He told him, okay, this is what I'm looking for. He didn't tell him his full story as a person or anything like that. I said, my son in America had a son, and we want to know who is returned through that child. He told him that your father is back, but I don't do divination on that day. So he went back another day. They confirmed it again that it is my grandfather. Now, what is very interesting is, you know my grandfather and you know my son, there's no doubt in the world. Every morning, I'm sure you heard him earlier. Every morning, my son will wake up. He must drink his tea. He has to have tea, right? Every morning. I don't know if it's the same in Jamaica, but in Nigeria, we call hot chocolate tea.
Yeah, everything is tea. As long as it's happening in the morning and it's hot, it's tea.
Yeah, exactly. So every morning he has to have his tea like my grandfather. He must read before bed, just like the grandfather. Very much of the same nature, same manners and things like that. So he has returned. I myself am a reincarnation of a man who was a palm wine tapper. He would make traditional gin and things like that for people. And when I was getting married, when I then returned to do the wedding, my past life son, I met my past life son, a 60-some-year-old man. And there was a way he would speak to me and look at me and so forth. He knew who I was. He knew that I was his father returned, and he hadn't had a chance to meet me. But he was my best friend for the entire wedding, right? He stayed close to me at all times, that type of thing. He looked out for me, so on and so forth. In that he transferred the affection he had for his father onto me, a person he had never met from Adam. You know, and so that is the personal experience I have as far as reincarnation goes.
So how do we recognize, and you talk about divination, we have just 8 minutes, you know, but how do divination and how do we recognize each other again? You know, I have a poem about that I wrote when I was about 12 years old, you know, and this is why this is really freaking me out right now. Because you know, I had this revelation that if we could recognize each other again as we come and we go, then what that would mean, but no idea how do we do this.
Absolutely. And to build on what you just said, many of us have past life experiences and past life memories. Now, because we don't understand what is fully going on, we may call it something else. Right? In Igbo cosmology, an individual can reincarnate into multiple children. So I share an Agon or an Onyowa, we call it Agon or Onyowa, with my cousin Emeka. We reincarnated from the same person. And I grew up in America and for a little bit, and you know, he grew up entirely in Nigeria. But when we met each other, we were inseparable. Now we didn't know this. We were 6-year-old children. We didn't know this. But him and I were inseparable. And we were inseparable in that our interests correlated almost 100%. We were both reserved. We both liked to think and discuss things that weren't, I guess, what we would call normal for a 6-year-old child. We like to make things and start adventures and things like that together and so forth. So a lot of those things, a lot of those interests, a lot of the things about you are past life reflexes and past life memories that are coming through. Now, how an individual then finds out who they reincarnate from is either through divination, right? And I'm sure you've either seen this done in a process known as Afa. That's where we get the term Ifa in Yoruba. You understand it, and more or less the same system. Is the use of the Afa is how an individual then finds out who their Agon is. And often it'll happen either, there's a multitude of methods, and I myself am not a Dibia, so I don't want to say this is absolutely how it's done, because everybody, I'm sure, has their method, their tweaks and things to the methodology. But what is very commonly done is, while divination is done, you will speak onto the nodes, the divination nodes, and you will call different names. And the child's reaction will give you an indication of who that person is. Now, I have a personal theory, but I said, like I said, I'm a Debia, so I'm not going to say this is what it is.
Yeah.
I can only speak on what I've researched. I have a personal theory that mothers often know who it is that is returning.
Oh.
I have a strong, and if you check with a lot of our mothers, especially us African people, if you check with a lot of our mothers, you will see this. You'll say, yes, I had this dream, or I had this feeling, and I knew X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. We often know who it is. Right?
How important? Sorry to cut in. How important are dreams in Igbo cosmology?
Yes. So I spoke about Agon, which is that universal mind, right? Now we can see Agon as a being or an entity, but in reality is space, right? Agon is like a cosmic internet that connects all things, right? And the meeting place of all Agon is the easiest meeting place for an individual is in dream. Right? An individual, in order to access your Agon, there's often the closing of the eyes. And you'll see this in different cultures, whether they call it meditation, whether you call it entering trance, and whether you call it going to sleep. They're all similar. And there's a closing of the eyes, and there's an entering into the deeper mind, right? There's a reason, and I'm sure you have these stories in Jamaica as well, that the turtle is revered as a symbol of wisdom for African people, most specifically for Igbo people. Because the turtle is able to go into itself. So dreams allow us to go into ourself and interface with the things that are not physical, right? So oftentimes one thing that started when I began calling my ancestors names and establishing my altar to them and rebuilding my relationship with them is that my dreaming quantified. And in that dreaming, I was able to find, I'm till this day able to find answers. If I have a question about something, either simple or difficult, I'll lie down and sleep. And when I wake up, either I've had a dream that gave me the answer, or I now within myself know that answer because I was able to interface with a higher wisdom by connecting to that cosmic internet through Agon, and that is most often done for people in dreams. So it is the neutral ground by which all of the unseen and seen forces can interact with each other.
My brother, so this is our way of life. We're talking about ourselves here. We're talking about ourselves as Africans. We're talking about Igbo people. And this is what, but this we have lost, not just in the diaspora because of the Ma'afa and the enslavement, but also continental Africa. So a lot of this we have lost as a result of colonization that comes with Christianity, Eurocentric Christianity, and so on. This is part of returning to the source. Here is a note from a brother while you were speaking. He wrote me this. He says, Blessed day, Kabu. I give you special thanks this day for that segment on Igbo cosmology. My restless spirit has begun the calming process. Some of the initial questions I had 50 years ago as a 16-year-old who rejected Christianity because of confusion by Western concepts of spirituality and began a search for truth are beginning to be unraveled. And I'm getting many, many, many notes like that this morning. So what does it mean to you, and how should we view this in terms of this being our African self? We're not talking about religion here. We're talking just about a way of life, aren't we?
Yes. This is who we are as a people. This is how we have survived longer than any people in what we know as the world and creation. We are the first people, we are the oldest people, and we are still here and strong for a reason, right? Oftentimes, people will say those things, and I'm honored by those comments, but I also want to remind everybody that everything I'm saying, you already know.
Yes.
These are things that you already know within yourself. So it is not that I am putting information into you. I am allowing, or I'm giving you a platform or a method by which you can feel the information which is inside of you. And that's why the resonance happens on a different level when we talk about these things for African people. Because these are beyond past life memory. Your chi, and that thing called Agon that brought you into the world, has the mind of God. It has the mind of creation. It is the mind of creation, and it is also your mind.
Right, and this is
you that is living. You are divine, exactly. So again, I spoke about the chi being similar to the sun. When you feel something, the way you know what your chi wants for you, or the way you align with your chi is the idea of resonance. There's a warmth that you will feel when you're close to your chi. So when I say these things and you're remembering from your ancestral bank of knowledge from within yourself, you will feel that resonance. Yeah.
And the bottom line is, and once again, we're just saying this, just open yourselves to this and to be yourselves, return to the source, because this is who we were, this is who we are, and this is who we will be. It's a time of awakening. We have to return to our African ways of knowing. Now, quickly, my brother, tell us, where can we find you? How can we get to the library, the e-library, to read up more of what you've got in store for us, and just to listen to a lot of your lectures, because you've got quite a few of that out.
I appreciate that, yes. So I am the host of The Medicine Shell on YouTube, all one word, The Medicine Shell.
SHELL, by the way, Medicine Shell, MEDCINE, medicine, DICINE, medicine, shell, SHELL.
Shell.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm the host of The Medicine Shell on YouTube. On The Medicine Shell, I discuss everything that we're talking about on this program. I present video essays that break each concept down in depth and give an understanding. All of it is completely accessible. This is something that I will do for the next foreseeable future and beyond. So subscribe if you can on YouTube to The Medicine Shell. Now, we also have an Odinani group study on the Patreon, which is patreon.com /The Medicine Shell. This group study is a back and forth live. In fact, I'm going to be entering it pretty soon after this call. It is a back and forth conversation where we learn with each other and we build, and we're sharing this information. But what is also nice about for the patrons is we also have an in-house debia, right? So, as with anything, there's a credibility situation where I want to make sure I find the best possible person to recommend to my patrons.
Yes.
So our in-house debia is somebody that I've vetted and I've seen their work and it's effective and I have accounts for. And if you're on patreon.com /The Medicine Shell and become a patron, you have access to that. And then again, as you said, with the library is also available to my patrons at patreon.com /The Medicine Shell, which has all of what I use to research and goes into topics such as Ubin, Rastafari, and Kemetic sciences and Ifa and so forth.
All right, brilliant. We'll talk to you soon. I hope that we'll be able to talk to you at least once every 2 months or so on as we look at Igbo cosmology. Thank you so much, my brother.
Absolutely.
All right.
I appreciate it, my sister.
All
Thank
right.
you for having me.
Thank you so much, Derek Ofodiniwa, teacher of Igbo cosmology, spirituality, and culture.